Good evening and welcome. Tonight I'm going to be reading to you from this book called The Book of Pride, LGBTQ Heroes Who Changed the World. It's a really great book and it is full of little short autobiographies of LGBTQ heroes. It's great. First of all, happy Pride, everyone. I'm going to do a Pride video every Pride month. If you don't like that, the unsubscribe button's right down there somewhere. If you disagree with this, goodbye. I'm a member of the LGBTQ plus community, and hold on, my old notes just slipped. There we go. And I will always show up for my people, and I will always let this be a safe space for anyone who is also in the LGBTQ plus community. You're very welcome here, and you're very safe here. And I love you all very much. So, I went through this book, and I picked out pretty much the first 5 biographies I found that I thought were really interesting and were YouTube friendly, pretty much. Not too many buzzwords that YouTube does not like, if you know what I mean. So let's get into it. This first one is for Kyler Broadus, transgender legal pioneer from Washington, D.C. It's a little biography, then we get to the autobiography. It says, Kyler William Broadus was born on August 28th, 1963, in Fayette, Missouri, and designated female at birth. While still presenting as female, Kyler made his first foray into the world of politics, winning election as student body president at Central Methodist University during his senior year. Kyler then earned his J.D. at the University of Missouri School of Law. In the late 1990s, after informing his employer of his plan to transition from female to male, Kyler's work environment became increasingly unwelcoming and unsupportive. After being forced to resign and having realized it was, and still is, completely legal in Missouri for companies to discriminate based on gender, Kyler undertook a long, committed journey to develop federal, state, and local protections for people regardless of their gender identity or gender expression. His many scholarly articles on transgender advocacy in family and employment law fundamentally shaped academic and legal discussions of gender. In 2010, Kyler founded the Trans People of Color Coalition, or the TPOCC, to fill a gap in the private and nonprofit sectors. In 2012, Kyler became the first openly transgender person to testify before the U.S. Senate in support of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA. In 2011, the National LGBTQ Task Force honored Kyler with its Susan J. Hyde Activism Award for longevity in the movement, and the Freedom Center for Social Justice presented Kyler with its Pioneer Award. So here's his story. I was born in Fayette, Missouri on August 28, 1963, which was the historic March on Washington on that very same day. Everybody talks about the Emancipation Proclamation and when slavery ended, but sadly my parents suffered lots of hate, were subject to Jim Crow laws, and suffered all the atrocities that were the new framing of slavery. When I grew up, signs were still separate for restrooms. I still remember going to the drugstore for entertainment, and then going to the bathroom, and then this woman putting her hand in my face, being a little kid, saying, "You can't go there," and me reading the signs. They were labeled Negro and white, and then colored and white. My parents focused on us. They wanted to make our lives better than their lives. They taught us how to navigate this world as Black Americans. They taught me, yes, when an officer pulls you over, what you have to do and how clean you have to be as a black person, because people harass black people just for being black. They taught us you're always going to be targeted because of the race of your skin, and you're always going to have to jump twice as high because of the race of your skin. My first job came at 5 years old. I went with my father to his night job, and I'll never forget, I was so happy to be promoted from emptying the trash cans to cleaning the water fountain. My dad's coworkers would say, "Oh, you brought your son with you today," and he'd say, "Yep," and he'd just keep it moving, never bat an eye. In the 2nd grade, I began to act out. Trans children act out and have anger, and that's how they find out that trans children are trans early on, because there's a certain way we act out. My father became great cover for me because my mother would lay out outfits and then he let me change them to more masculine outfits. I prayed to God every day to fix me because that's what I knew, and I grew up in the Bible Belt of this country, which is Missouri, and so that was the religion, but nothing ever changed. Finally, one day when I was 12 or 13, I found this National Enquirer with an article about Billy Tipton. Billy Tipton, editor's note. Billy Tipton was an American jazz musician. Although he lived his adult life as a man, it was discovered after his death in 1989 that he was assigned female at birth. I hid this National Enquirer in our house like it was a Playboy magazine, so I could come home and look at it, and I stopped praying to God every day because at least I then had a role model in Billy Tipton. Billy died in poverty before his time because he didn't want to seek a medical intervention to blow his cover. And still, just learning about him gave me a grounding to know that I wasn't crazy. There were people out there like me that I can relate to, and I can figure out hopefully how to move forward. Nothing out here for trans people. After law school, I got a job with a financial services company and wanted to move up the ranks, but their rigidity towards women, which I was classified as, was very sexist, and I didn't fit that whole sexist mark. I was wearing suits all day every day and looked like I do now with a short haircut. Then I told them I wanted to change my name to what people called me, which was KB. They said that that wasn't proper for a woman. I said, "You have other employees that use their initials, so why can't I use mine?" That's where it began. My boss started calling me every hour on the hour in the evenings, creating ridiculous projects that were due the next morning. I'd stay up all night and get them done. Then he'd be shocked because they'd be done, but they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. It was like, "It's clear you don't want me here," so we parted ways. That's when I knew I needed to go into advocacy because there were no laws to protect me. I went from making significant income to no income, and then to having my career destroyed. I said, wow, there's nothing out here for trans people. I've got to get on this because I don't want anybody to go through what I've gone through. Intersections. In 2010, after waiting for other and younger people to form some sort of intersection of people of color and trans people, I formed the Trans People of Color Coalition. I just kept seeing the lack of intersectionality. As I traveled and did my trans work, I would hear from every pocket, whether it was rural or whether it was metropolitan. I don't feel anybody's doing any work for me. I feel isolated. And I heard that from every trans person of color. So we formed. It's great to have allies, but it's also great for the impacted group to be the speakers for that movement. I don't just mean trans people of color, but trans people in general. We sometimes think that because I'm oppressed in one way, that I understand every form of oppression. But how can I understand your struggle as a gay white man when I'm not? And what makes you think you can understand my struggle as a trans black man if you're not? We have to have an openness to understanding that. If we're not open to that, then we need to be having a discussion about why not. If we're mindful, we can learn lots from each other. The Time magazine cover gets us visibility. As editor's note, in May 2014, Time magazine ran a cover article under the headline, "The Transgender Tipping Point, America's Next Civil Rights Frontier." But we still have to change hearts and minds and get those rights. A magazine cover is not a piece of legislation. It's not a court case. We need social change, not just visibility. Black Americans have been visible forever. It takes more than that. Here's this little post-biography here. It says, "Outwards caught up with Kyler at the 2016 Lavender Law Conference in Washington, D.C. Although bone-tired, Kyler gave a compelling account of his transformation into the man he was born to be, a man who has fundamentally altered the legal standing for trans people in America." Thank you, Kyler. Right, next, we're going to read about Alexei Romanov, which I thought, wasn't he killed by the Bolsheviks? But no, not that Alexei Romanov. This is Ukrainian immigrant and activist from Los Angeles, California. Alexei Romanov was born in the Ukraine in 1936, fled with his family to the United States during World War II, and came of age as a gay man in New York's Greenwich Village during the 1950s. By 1966, Alexei was co-owner and manager of a Los Angeles gay bar called New Faces. On New Year's Eve, New Faces, the nearby Black Cat, and 2 other gay bars were raided by the police. 6 weeks later, Alexei helped organize a protest at the Black Cat, taking place more than 2 years before the Stonewall riots of June 1969. Many people regard this event as the true genesis of the modern gay rights movement. Lifelong activist, Alexei worked to establish gay-friendly medical clinics, fought against California's anti-gay Briggs Initiative, fought for AIDS research funding, helped convince Alcoholics Anonymous to list LGBT meetings, and co-founded the Avatar Club of Los Angeles to promote safer sex education for the leather community. In 2017, Alexei served as Grand Marshal of the Los Angeles Resist March, which took the place of that year's traditional Pride March. When I was 16 or 17 in New York City, it was really hard to rent a place for 2 men. 2 women could rent together, but they would not want to rent to 2 men, particularly in the Village, of all places. I had this partner, and we saw an advertisement for an apartment with a view of the river. It didn't say East River, it didn't say Hudson River, just view of the river. We went and looked at it. The view of the river was, if you went out to the fire escape and hung over about 2 feet, you could see about 2 inches of the river way down there. But we liked the place. We talked to each other. We talked to the landlord and said we'd like to take it. The landlord said, "What's the relationship between you 2? I stopped for a minute and I stuttered and I said, "He's my partner and my lover." I looked back at my boyfriend and he was looking at me with his mouth hanging open and eyes wide as though to say, "What have you just done?" The landlord then said to me, "Can you guys afford the place?" I said, "Yes, we have your first month's rent here. We both work part-time. We're going to the university. I sit out on the street on weekends and sell my artwork, and I study." He said, "Okay, give me the first month's rent. Here's the keys." To this day, I have never lied. To this day, if someone asks me, I tell the truth. Face down on the sidewalk. I arrived in Los Angeles on February 15th, 1958. Eventually, I was working in a bar called the High Spot. It was on Hyperion Boulevard down in Silver Lake. Evidently, my reputation got out as being friendly because I've always been a talker and a person who likes to meet new people. In 1964, this woman, her name was Lee Roy, came over to the High Spot and she said, "I'm trying to open a bar here on Sunset Boulevard. We've already got the place rented. I would like you to come and help me set it up." I thought it was a really good thing. Lee ended up giving me part ownership of the bar for helping to set it up. That's how I got involved in New Faces. On New Year's Eve 1966, the police raided another bar up the street called the Black Cat. After they played Auld Lang Syne and everybody was hugging and kissing, that's when the raid started. These people ran out of the Black Cat and ran down the block to New Faces. The police followed them. Of course, they were plainclothes. They weren't uniformed officers. Evidently, they saw somebody who ran away from the Black Cat in a white dress. The people from the Black Cat ran into New Faces, and the police followed them in. Because it was New Year's Eve, Leroy was dressed in a white gown. The cop said, "Who is the owner of this place?" The bartender said, "Leroy," which sounded like a man's name, and pointed at Lee. The cops went over and grabbed her and started beating her because they thought she was a cross-dresser. They broke her collarbone. Then the bartender came over and they grabbed him and they pulled him across the bar. He had a ruptured spleen. Both Lee and the bartender ended up on the sidewalk outside, face down. When they found that Lee wasn't a cross-dresser, they didn't press any charges on her. Both she and the bartender ended up in the hospital. Of course, that's not my word, that's his, From Bunker Hill to the Black Cat. After the events of New Year's Eve 1966, a demonstration took place at the Black Cat in February 1967. The Black Cat had the most damage from what had happened on New Year's Eve. We made a lot of signs. We made flyers at a printing store because nobody had printers. If someone dropped a flyer, we would run and pick it up so that the police couldn't bust us for littering. We kept moving so the police couldn't bust us for loitering. It was 500 to 600 gay men and women, lesbians, and those who supported us. We marched up and down and chanted. We were afraid the news media would show. We were afraid because if our pictures were in the paper, we would lose our jobs. We would lose our homes. None of the mainstream media showed up, but the free press showed up. They covered it with the pictures, all the pictures we have today. Years later, I met with Chief Bill Bratton of the Los Angeles Police Department. We were looking at the pictures from the demonstration. I said to him, "Do you see anybody smiling?" He looked at them and he said, "No." I said, "They weren't. They were scared as hell." About 2 years, we had the Black Cat designated a historical landmark. An Asian man led that charge. His name was Wes Joe. He's still around today. I was asked why I wanted this place declared a historical landmark and a plaque put outside. I said, just like you have Bunker Hill, you have Gettysburg, you have Selma, Alabama, some young gay man who's maybe 18 when I'm no longer here and able to tell him what had happened. He has a place to go that's a physical place with a plaque outside. That's why we need that. We need to remember where we came from. So true. Today, Alexei lives with his husband David in Los Angeles. With his twinkling blue eyes, it's easy to imagine Alexei as a Ukrainian immigrant charming the pants off New York queers in the 1950s. But Alexei's fighting spirit is never far away. It's what has kept him going all these years. Alright, next we're going to read about Donna Sachet, drag queen and community activist from my town, San Francisco, California. Donna Sachet was born Kirk Reeves in 1954 in South Carolina. Kirk's young life was marked by a violent, alcoholic father and a mother afraid to fight back. After graduating from Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, Kirk headed to New York to work in retail fashion. He spent the 1980s there, watching AIDS grow into a full-throttled epidemic. In 1990, Kirk was offered a job in San Francisco, just months after the city was devastated by the Loma Prieta earthquake. Kirk was ready for upheaval. He headed west. A few years later, Kirk found himself performing in drag at a talent show. The crowd went wild, and Donna Sachet was born. Over the past 2 decades, Donna has entertained at venues as diverse as San Francisco's Great American Music Hall, the foot of the Washington Monument, the New York Marriott Marquis Hotel on Broadway, and the International Mr. Leather competition in Chicago. More importantly, Donna has helped raise millions of dollars for various causes. She has won dozens of awards, including the 2005 San Francisco Police Officers Pride Alliance Award, the 2011 Bank of America's Local Heroes Award, and the 2015 Horizon Foundation's Leadership Award. For 25 years, her annual Songs of the Season musical cabaret show has raised money for the AIDS Emergency Fund. In 2009, Donna became the first drag performer to sing the national anthem at a Major League Baseball game. She did it at AT&T Park in her adopted hometown of San Francisco. Go Giants. This might be a really triggering story, by the way. If you grew up in a home that wasn't open to these kinds of things, just be wary. My upbringing was pretty typically Southern. My father was the breadwinner, and he ruled the house with an iron fist. There was never any question of disobeying him, because there was corporal punishment. He was a heavy drinker, and my mother was just cooperative with all of that, and let whatever happened, happen. I played with dolls since I was a really small child. I wasn't able to own dolls, so I'd make pipe cleaner dolls and make clothes for them out of paper and pieces of fabric I found. It was very minimal, but I just loved the creative process of it. I watched black and white movies and I thought, this is like Audrey Hepburn, Big Hats, or something. One day, my father found me in the backyard playing with a girl from next door. We played with dolls together sometimes, creating outfits. My dad was just outraged. He ran home and he grabbed everything up. We built a bonfire in the backyard, and he made me throw in all the dolls. They weren't store-bought. I'd made them. They were characters in my life. He said, "Do you have anything else?" I never disobeyed them. I just lived in terror. So I brought this box of scraps that I was going to make things out of, that all went in the bonfire. And then he took my hand and put it in the ashes to reinforce the lesson. This is wrong. There's something wrong with you. Of course there isn't. Now, Voyager. Growing up, I loved those movies with Bette Davis and Joan Crawford and strong female characters. Or the Bette Davis movie, Now Voyager. She's transformed from this ugly duckling to this chic woman on a cruise ship. I mean, that was the dream for many of us. I could relate to these women's power and their clothes and their mannerisms. Some of it was the very stuff I was being teased for in school. Why are you walking down the hall like that? What are you strutting for? At that time, I was like, why can't I hold my hips straight? Why am I walking funny? But then you watch those movies, and those women didn't just come down the staircase, they owned the staircase. I wanted to do that too, but I was a guy, and I was never going to be in the movies. It was so frustrating to see that gap between what I wanted and what I saw there. I don't think I was dealing with the gay part of myself yet, as much as I was dealing with the gender-specific roles that we play. I think that continues today. I don't think I've fully defined it yet. Why do I want to do the things I want to do? because it feels good to me. So many people put drag on. I feel like I let drag out. That there's this character in here that I sat on for so long, and that so many people around me forced down, and now I'm able to fully express that character. Look at that sachet. In 1990, I moved to San Francisco. New Yorker said, "Didn't you just see that earthquake that happened there? Are you crazy?" I was so ready for change. About a year after arriving in San Francisco, I joined the Gay Men's Chorus, which was a big thing for me because in New York, I never joined anything that was openly gay. The chorus was eye-opening for me. Some of the members were rich, some poor, some students, some successful, some were older, some were younger. I began to have gay friends for the first time. The Gay Men's Chorus used to take retreats once or twice a year at a camp up in the woods to rehearse music and kind of get to know each other. Before one of the retreats, they announced they were going to have a talent show contest on Saturday night. I thought, oh, I'm just so tempted to do this. That person living inside me for all those years wanted to come out. I practiced a Donna Summer number, lip syncing, of course. I didn't have a dress, but I had this Asian-style robe with the dragon on the back. I didn't have high heels. I used ballet slippers. I did buy a wig. I practiced my song for many weeks and got it all down. At the contest, I introduced myself as Donna Winter because she was Donna Summer. She's black, so I was Donna Winter. I didn't know how I got the courage to do that. As I left the stage, everyone exploded in applause. I heard this guy in the aisles say, "Look at that sachet." Everything kind of fell in place. Not, "Look at that stupid walk," or "What's wrong with you?" but "Look at that sachet," with admiration. The character inside of me had finally been released. I changed my name to Donna Sachet right on the spot. In July 2016, Donna invited Outwards to record her story at her stylish home just above San Francisco's legendary Castro neighborhood. After talking openly about her wretched childhood and the freedom she finally found in the city by the bay, Donna sounded a wise warning against divisiveness and complacency within the LGBTQ community. United we stand, divided they get us one by one. Next, this is Dean Hammer, scientist and filmmaker in Oahu, Hawaii. Dean Hammer was born in 1951 in Montclair, New Jersey. He graduated from Trinity College in Connecticut and earned a PhD from Harvard Medical School. After determining that medical research was more compelling to him than treating individual patients, Dean spent 35 years as an independent researcher at the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH. In the 1990s, Dean began studying the relationship between human behavior and genetics. In 1993, his research group's first paper, published in Science, presented the first ever findings linking homosexuality to a particular region of the X chromosome, the so-called gay gene. Dean's book on the topic, The Science of Desire, became a New York Times notable book of the year. His second book, The God Gene, explored the relationship between faith and genetics. In later years, Dean developed a potential form of HIV prevention, which is currently entering preclinical testing. His research has been cited by medical scholars nearly 20,000 times. In the early 2000s, Dean met filmmaker Joe Wilson. Together, they produced the Emmy Award-winning documentary Out in the Silence. After moving to Hawaii in 2011, Dean and Joe produced Kumuhina, a documentary about gender diversity among Pacific Islander peoples. Their most recent film, Latest in Waiting, explores gender diversity in Tonga, the last remaining monarchy in the specific. I remember when this study came out, so I thought the story was interesting. I've always been curious about how things work. I'm always wondering, why does A lead to B, or what is causing C? When I graduated from college, I'd already spent 2 summers in a laboratory. I knew that I loved research, but everyone told me, you should go to medical school. You'll make a much better living. You can do research on the side. Then I got accepted at Harvard Medical School, and everyone again told me, you can't turn down Harvard Medical School. You gotta go there. I didn't love medical school. I found a lot of it was rote learning. I wasn't all that keen about dealing with patients. I was like, oh my God, they're complaining about their illnesses again. After a year of medical school, I just said, I'm going to go on a leave of absence and do research full time. I remained on leave of absence from Harvard Medical School for the next 25 years. I started my scientific career at a really auspicious point, because it was just at that time when we were progressing from a general idea of what genetics were to a very specific ability to actually isolate genes and to look at them and to manipulate them. I started thinking and thinking. I was thinking I could study alcoholism or I could study depression. Finally, at some point, I think actually my partner at that time said, why don't you study sexual orientation? I was like, oh my God, that's a really good idea. I went rushing to the library and realized no one had studied anything about sexual orientation at a molecular level ever. It was a completely wide open field. We set out to find whether there is a genetic basis for sexual orientation, and if so, how it works. As I was doing the research, it was never much of a concern to me what the reaction would be, because I had spent my whole life with other scientists. The criterion there is good science or bad science, important science or not important science. I felt that if we were able to crack this at all, it would be, of course, good science, because we're doing it the right way, and it would be important because that's the fundamental question. Sexuality is the driving force of biology. Sexuality is how we pass on our genes. It's everything. Our original research was actually pretty simple. We looked at a bunch of families of gay men and asked about their gay relatives, and noticed there was a pattern that most of the gay relatives were on the mother's side of the family. That was really interesting. The next step was to look for actual DNA sequences on the X chromosome that were associated with sexual orientation. To do that, we got a bunch of gay brothers, 44 pairs of gay brothers. We found that there is one specific region called XQ28 that the gay brothers shared far more often than would be expected by chance. Their straight brothers usually didn't have that region. That told us there's some gene in that part of the chromosome that is somehow tipping the scales and making these guys more likely to be gay. That became the somewhat misnomed gay gene. When that research came out, it caused a huge sensation. It was on the front page of every paper, not just in the United States, but all around the world. I was on every news show. I got on the Oprah show. I did Ted Koppel. It was a huge big fight, and I stepped right into the middle of it. There were some people, especially gay people, who thought this is great, because if we can prove that being gay is not a choice, that will take away a lot of the prejudice. There was a lot of the anti-gay people, especially the religious people, who were infuriated by the research because it is their firm belief that people choose to be gay, and it is a bad choice, and that's what makes it a sin. Therefore, this research couldn't possibly be right. Then there were also people, gay people, who were very concerned the research would be misused and that gay fetuses would be aborted and that the military would be doing secret testing. They were very concerned about that as well. It was a very, very split and controversial reaction at the time. I know it's an old adage. that the truth will set you free. What I know for sure is that the untruth and wrong thought will never allow you to be free. I believe that. So watching Dean paddle out with Joe to catch a few waves on Oahu's North Shore, you might think time has mellowed him. It hasn't. Dean today is as fiercely determined as ever when it comes to searching for truth and defending every individual's right to enjoy the ancient Hawaiian values of pono, doing the right thing, and aloha, living life with love. All right, one more story tonight. Let me see. If you enjoy this, there's so many other good stories in here. I'll definitely check this book back out from my library and read more next year if you guys want. Just let me know. There's a bunch of stories here. Speaking of black cats, my black cat has shown up. Hi, baby. This is Luigi Ferrer, bisexual activist and HIV/AIDS educator from Miami, Florida. Hi, baby. Hey, what's wrong? Okay. Luigi Ferrer was born in 1958 in Ponce, Puerto Rico. At 27, Luigi was living in Florida and working on a PhD in oceanography when he was diagnosed with HIV. Believing he had only a few months to live, he decided to dedicate his remaining time to battling AIDS. More than 30 years later, he's still battling. Luigi's first post was an executive director of Miami's second largest AIDS service organization, Body Positive. He later worked for several national HIV specialized pharmacies, was president of Florida AIDS Action, now is the AIDS Institute, and served on the boards of the AIDS Action Council and the National Association of People with AIDS. In 1996, Luigi played a key role in the first reauthorization of the Ryan White CARE Act. In subsequent years, funding for the CARE Act's drug assistance program increased tenfold, from $52 million to $528 million. Luigi is one of the 6 founding board members of BiNet USA. In 1998, to help counteract media portrayals of bisexual men as the ultimate pariahs of the AIDS epidemic, Luigi helped organize the National Institute on Bisexuality HIV/AIDS Summit, hosted by BiNet USA. I was infected with HIV by my first boyfriend in 1979, before we knew anything about HIV or AIDS or GRID. Several years later, I was 3 years into my PhD in oceanography at the University of Miami when I was diagnosed with HIV formally. At that time, you were diagnosed and you died within 6 months. I had already been working at the Body Positive Resource Center here at Miami as a volunteer, and because of my expertise in grant writing, I was offered the position of executive director. So I left my oceanography program and became executive director at the Body Positive Resource Center. At that time, we were doing a lot of palliative care, watching our friends die, coming together as a family to help each other in those difficult times. Our lesbian sisters were amazing. I spent 12 years of my life as if I only had another 2 years to live. I was on AZT monotherapy, which was horrible. I would take my medications and go lie down because I knew within 5 minutes that punch in the stomach was coming. I would roll in bed for about 20 minutes and then it would pass. One second, my cat is trying to jump up on top of the desk and he's going to knock things over. Kitty cat. Psst, 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 psst. Jen, Jen. Hey. Don't do that. That's such a bad idea, my love. Hey, baby. Thank you, puppy. Okay. You want to say hi to everybody? Here's a steal. Anyway, I was spending 3 to 4 days in bed just to be able to function marginally during the other 3 to 4 days, but I did remain employed during that whole time, so I had good insurance. When my T cells finally dropped down to 0, I said to my doctor, "So I've been taking this medication that makes me feel horrible to keep my T cells up. Now I have 0 T cells. What does that mean?" He says, "Your guess is as good as mine." "Can I stop taking this medication?" "Sure, stop." So I spent about 3 years with 0 T cells, but I was able to get intravenous immunoglobulin, IVIG, every 2 weeks. It costs about $1,200 a dose. Essentially, I would get an immune system in a bottle every 2 weeks. Oh, he's done it. He's gone on top of the desk. Oh, he's gonna knock things over. Oh, he's in my light. Little boy. It's such a bad idea. Oh my gosh. He's desperately trying to get my attention. I'm just trying to finish this nice story. It has a happy ending. He's about to knock things over, and then I have to cut out the loud sound of him knocking everything over. He's being very careful. Okay, I'm going to try to keep going while he's making a ruckus on the top of my desk. $1,200 a dose. Eventually, I would get an immune system in a bottle every 2 weeks. Alright, I got him off the desk. Now both my cats are in here. It's either going to be a nightmare or it'll be very quiet, but I'm going to read through this story. That I believe is what really kept me alive. When protease inhibitors came on the market, I started taking a protease inhibitor. Within a month, I had 20 T cells, which was remarkable because we didn't really know at that point that the immune system could be reconstituted. Nowadays, I have almost 800 T cells, which is almost normal. There's cat hair everywhere now. At age 39, realizing I was going to turn 40 pretty soon and that I had no savings, I decided to buy a home with a 30-year mortgage. I realized I wasn't going to go anywhere, so it was a real shift in my attitude, wanting for the first time to make long-term plans, settle down, and figure out what I was going to do in my old age. I like this story. I'm bisexual, so this is funny. Are those your shoes? My most vivid incident of biphobia was meeting a guy through the personals in the newspaper because we didn't have online dating yet, and going out on a first date. We went to a nice Thai restaurant, took our shoes off, and sat down at a little table. We had just ordered and were talking, and I said that I was bisexual because it wasn't anything that I was embarrassed about. This guy just got up and left. He didn't say a word. He just got up and left. So I finished the meal, paid, and as I'm walking out, the waitress says, "Are these your shoes?" The guy was in such a panic and in such a hurry to get out of there that he had left his shoes. I love that story. Seatbelts. One of the issues that we're having here in Miami-Dade County today is the fact that our teenagers in high school live in the jurisdiction of the country that has, and has had for the past 6 years, the highest HIV rate in the country, the highest number of new HIV infections in the country. And they don't get any sex education in school. That is unconscionable. The school board has said nothing to address this issue, although we've asked repeatedly. There are several factors that contribute to the high rates of transmission. The fact that we're an immigrant majority city. 57% of the people in Miami are foreign born. That means they come from a different cultural context. The sexual silence that we won't talk about it. Then all the machista culture. When people don't have the information they need to make good, informed decisions, they can't make them. It's not to say that if they had the information they needed to make good decisions, they would make the right decisions. But if they don't have the information, they just can't make those decisions. What passes for sex ed in our high schools right now is abstinence-based, abstinence only, and extremely heteronormative, and our queer teens complain about it all the time. I think parents don't realize the danger their kids are in. If they did, they'd be up in arms demanding comprehensive sex ed in our high schools. HIV prevention and using condoms isn't 100% effective. Neither are seatbelts. We still expect people to use them, right? I didn't have that information when I was 18, when I was 20, and that's one of the reasons why I'm HIV positive today. I do the work that I do because I don't want any other young people to have to live through what I lived through. There he is, very fashionable. Alright, my cats are trying to roll around and play at the end of this room. They're going to be very noisy very soon, so I'm going to wrap this up to hear them growling. They're silly. Thank you so much for watching. Remember that you are loved. You're important. You need to be here. Your voice is just as important. You never know. Maybe there'll be a second book of this in 30, 40, 50 years and you'll be in it. You don't know unless you stick around for that and make your voice heard and be proud of who you are. I hope that you have a good